With Elden Ring's updates coming to a close in what I can only assume will be a few more small balance patches, the future of the series is weighing heavy on my mind. The question of what's next is the only thing I can really focus on, since it seems nothing on my PvP adjustment wishlist is in the cards, and the DLC has pretty limited replay value. In the scope of the immediate future, Elden Ring seems to be continuing in some form via other media. I've heard talk of a TV series, as well as comics and novels, no doubt efforts to capitalize on a lucrative IP. But none of that is particularly interesting to me. Instead, I'm only interested in a sequel. Specifically, I'm interested in one never happening. Don't get me wrong, I like Elden Ring. I've enjoyed my time with it, frustrations and all. It's the game I've built my channel around, and I am forever grateful to FromSoft for continuing to be a standout in an industry increasingly devoid of true art. But when it comes to the next entry of Souls titles, I've had my fill of Elden Ring. It's no secret that the open world does little for me personally. I like a dense, difficult experience where limitations encourage creativity. The sheer scope and time required to complete an average playthrough tilts well into the exhaustive, and the modern anime levels of power scaling in the gameplay leave me missing more mundane sword and sorcery combat. Not to mention how disappointing the lack of multiplayer focus has been. All of these aspects tell me that Elden Ring 2 is not where I want the series to continue. And before you accuse me of just wanting Dark Souls 4, let me say that I don't want that either. I don't want a sequel to any game, and that's including even something as dear to me as Bloodborne, because sequels are often a mixed bag. I feel confident FromSoft said everything they needed to regarding Elden Ring in Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree. Sure, lots of questions remain unanswered, and not everyone got everything they wanted story-wise, but that's honestly the way it should be. Some things are better left unsaid. And the artistic temptation to do a sequel may not even exist within FromSoft. Miyazaki has never struck me as a creative who wants to retread old work. If the rest of the team shares that sentiment, making a sequel would almost certainly be the sort of thing motivated solely by profit rather than creativity. Not that this caliber of game isn't an effort to do both, but when that balance leans too heavily toward the former, the latter suffers immeasurably. Say what you will about FromSoft, they've prioritized art thus far. And I believe control over whether or not a sequel is produced is a primary factor in FromSoft acquiring the sole rights to the Elden Ring IP. Dark Souls was the company's first major breakthrough of the modern era, and it stands to reason they wanted to capitalize on that success with a sequel. And that meant Dark Souls 2, as I understand the matter, was being made with or without Miyazaki's involvement or approval. Leaving out the director and primary creator from a project built on their work is seldom a wise decision, and I think that played a big role in the game's quality and reception. Without a clear and concise vision and the right motivations, these sorts of projects are bound to struggle to live up to their names. It'd be similar to Sony commissioning a Bloodborne sequel without FromSoft. They may have the right, it might even be good, but it would be fan fiction at best. And a sequel to Elden Ring, the most monumental title in the Souls series, would have unimaginable shoes to fill. To try and recapture what makes it a great title while also innovating and improving the gameplay, it's hard to imagine. I have always thought of Elden Ring in relation to the Souls series as I think of Breath of the Wild in relation to the Zelda series. Both are open-world reimaginings of familiar gameplay systems that received critical acclaim while creating some division between old and new players. And in the ways that I see them as similar, I think a sequel to Elden Ring could end up like Tears of the Kingdom. Now, I haven't played Tears of the Kingdom, but my understanding is that it's somewhat disappointing as a sequel due to, among other things, a failure to recapture what made Breath of the Wild unique. And that's not even remotely surprising. Sequels tend to play it safe and not risk alienating fans of the original. In this way, they restrict the design. Not to say sequels can't be good. I really love Dark Souls 2, though mostly for the things it did differently rather than the things it tried to retain. And Majora's Mask might even be better than Ocarina of Time, if not quite as iconic or conventional. But the fact remains that it's not necessarily the right move. I maintain the best sequel to Dark Souls is Bloodborne. By choosing to be a completely different approach to the same formula, it recaptured what made Dark Souls great, without overt references or callbacks that never let the player forget they're playing a sequel. It's its own title and a true successor, not just some sequel. Elden Ring was a step back for me in that regard. It's a different sort of game, absolutely, but it shares way too much with Dark Souls to feel truly different. It is different, but in the way that Dark Souls 2 or 3 were different, albeit a bit more so. But I wanted Elden Ring to be a truly outstanding title instead of just big Dark Souls. Whether or not you agree with that baseline assessment is going to be subjective, but it's certainly the case for me. And big Dark Souls isn't exactly a bad pitch, but it's not the level of growth achieved by something like Bloodborne. Which is a real shame because I think that was the goal. I think FromSoft wanted to make Elden Ring stand out in as many ways as possible, to be an evolution of the formula that would serve to improve every possible aspect by taking them to their logical next step, and to do so by shedding the moniker of Souls, freeing it from the burdened past. While you might feel they accomplished that goal, that's not how I see it. I think the Souls formula works best when the player is restrained. The fight, die, repeat cycle lends itself to trial and error in a way that encourages slow and steady pacing. Tension is at the core of both exploration and combat. Setting up the game to require long-distance travel and many repeat encounters might be grand in scope, but it diffuses tension in a way I find ill-suited to the formula. Bigger is not always better. One of the best features of the Souls formula is replayability. There are things you will mess up on a first playthrough. NPC questlines are deliberately obtuse, and locking yourself out of specific endings or items is all too easy. While it can be frustrating, a game that is inviting to replay can make that sort of design much easier to appreciate. Elden Ring, on the other hand, runs into the issue where, because of the extended runtime, finding out you need to replay the entire game because you missed something can be demoralizing. If you don't believe me, check out Reddit for how many people hate the way the DLC handled NPC progression. Not to say Elden Ring isn't replayable or that it isn't fun to replay. Everyone's experience is subjective and there's no wrong way to enjoy these games. I'm simply in the less is more camp when it comes to the expansiveness of games and time required to complete. Replayability is far more important to me than there being another slightly altered catacomb. It's hard to picture a sequel not falling into those same traps. And beyond gameplay, Elden Ring feels pretty complete as a game world. Killing not one, but two gods by the end of both the main game and DLC gave me all the closure I really needed in terms of power scaling. The idea of it getting even crazier isn't all that appealing. While I don't think it would ever happen, a Souls game resembling action titles like God of War would likely mean the end of a combat system I cherish. Slow and steady with a focus on grounded realism has been the cornerstone of Souls combat since its inception. If they want to keep making bosses bigger and faster with fewer openings and higher damage, something's gotta give. We should also consider things like release schedules. Elden Ring took much longer to make than any previous title, and a huge part of that was due to the game's overall size. A smaller, leaner title with new ideas could be released potentially every 2 to 3 years, and we might be better off with incremental improvements to the carry-through systems. It seems clear Elden Ring's multiplayer and cut content covenants failed to receive attention due to development time restraints, most of which would be because of the expansive open world. The fact that the DLC took more than 2 years to release with no improvements to core systems indicates, at least in some part, just how much game size correlates with development. Even if a direct sequel focused entirely on refining multiplayer and other systems, there are fundamental problems with how the designs mesh or fail to do so. Asking for the best of all worlds is practically guaranteed to make the worst of each. All to say, Elden Ring has had a good life, and I'd be extremely skeptical of any direct continuation. It'd be one thing if there were design problems they wanted to fix and more stories they wanted to tell, but my problems with Elden Ring are largely because of its design goals and the scope of its stories. Miyazaki stated in an interview that Elden Ring is pretty much the limit for what they can achieve. It required tremendous effort from their team, and trying to go beyond that seems insurmountable. If they can't go bigger and better, progress should come in the form of density and diversity. Whatever direction they decide to take, I can only hope they recognize the strengths of each element and condense those into their purest forms. Let me know your thoughts on a sequel and the continuation of the Souls series as a whole in the comments down below. Like the video and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Until next time, thank you for watching.